Hello and welcome to the Tank Club's New World Tank Guide. In this comprehensive guide, we will provide you with all the necessary information to become a successful tank in the New World MMO. Tanking in New World offers a unique experience compared to other MMORPGs. As a tank, you'll be expected to play a hybrid role, combining tankiness with damage dealing. The game's skill-based action combat system means that you'll rely more on dodging and evading damage rather than simply blocking it. It's important to note that New World presents certain challenges for tanks, making it one of the least accessible games for this role. The developers intentionally designed threat and aggro mechanics to be difficult, making it challenging to control enemy positioning. Additionally, the collision system can be problematic, causing bosses to push you around and break through your character. This means that you'll need to rely on dodging attacks to maintain your position effectively. Being a good tank in New World heavily depends on the cooperation and support of your group. A capable healer and attentive damage dealers who follow your instructions on enemy focus and stacking are crucial for your success. Unfortunately, these factors may sometimes be out of your control. Despite the challenges, tanking plays a vital role in group content in New World. Tanks are needed for 5-person group activities like expeditions and arenas, while raids and larger group content often require multiple tanks. Mastering the tank role will open up numerous opportunities for you, as tanks are a rare breed in New World, likely due to the aforementioned challenges. In the following sections of this guide, we will delve into the various aspects of tanking in New World, including your attributes, weapon choices, armor selection, tanking strategies, and more. It's essential to note that this is not a specific tank build. Instead, it's a comprehensive guide on how to effectively tank in New World. By following our advice and adapting to the unique demands of New World, you'll increase your chances of becoming a successful tank in this MMO. So let's get started on your journey to becoming an awesome tank in New World. So first we're going to take a look at attributes. When it comes to attributes for tanking in New World, your primary focus should be on strength, dexterity, and constitution, or some combination of those three things. To achieve the desired stats, there are several steps that you need to take. Firstly, you've got your increased gear score. So the aim is to raise your gear score to 625. This will ensure that you have access to gear with the maximum desired attributes. You also got your gear selection, so look for gear that provides the necessary stats for tanking. Prioritize items that offer bonuses to strength, dexterity, and constitution. You've also got your food buffs, and you want to utilize food that provides a boost to the specific stats that you need. And quite often the most beneficial one is the constitution food because it's generally the cheapest, but you can also use food with strength or dexterity or a combination of some of those. Your attribute allocation, this is the last thing that you want to do. Make sure to allocate your attribute points accordingly to increase the stats that you need to maximize your benefits. By following these steps and optimizing your gear attributes and food choices, you'll be able to maximize the effectiveness of your tanking build in New World. Okay, so let's look at strength. So boosting your damage output is essential for generating threat and maintaining aggro on enemies. Strength affects various tank-related weapons such as the longsword, the great axe, the warhammer, the great sword, the hatchet, and the spear. Additionally, strength-based milestone perks provide damage buffs. We've also got dexterity, and while less commonly used than strength, dexterity can still be useful for tanks. Increasing your damage output helps maintain aggro, as we've mentioned. Dexterity also benefits several tank weapons like spear, longsword, hatchet, and greatsword. However, it's worth noting that at 300 points into dexterity, you unlock cheaper dodging, reducing stamina consumption by 10%. And then you've also got constitution. For newcomers to New World, constitution is highly valuable. Each point in constitution increases your max health, providing a buffer against mistakes and making it less likely for enemies to kill you. Constitution milestones offer significant benefits such as stronger consumables, increased max health based on physical armor, reduced critical damage taken, increased physical and elemental armor, 60% damage reduction when at full health, and the essential grit for basic melee attacks. Grit prevents stagger when you do a light and a heavy attack, which allows you to continue attacking without losing your position or becoming vulnerable while doing those light and heavy attacks. Since permanent blocking is nearly impossible for tanks, utilizing light and heavy attacks become crucial for managing stamina during combat which is why grit is so important. So if we take a look at some suggested attributes. So the first one is 300 constitution with 211 strength. This is the standard setup, allowing you to benefit from all of the advantages of constitution while also utilising an effective damage stat for various tank weapons, and it's very versatile. You can switch your weapon and strength will typically cover it. As you advance in tanking, focusing more on damage becomes important. So as you become really strong and really top tier at tanking, you can reduce your constitution, and eventually you can reduce it down to 100 to 150. You can increase your dexterity to 150 and then you put everything else into strength. But this is for players as you become more advanced. You don't need as much constitution the more advanced you get. Remember, attribute allocation can vary depending on your playstyle and preference. These suggested attribute setups serve as a starting point, and as you progress as a tank, you can experiment and adjust them accordingly. Okay, next we're going to look at weapons. In New World, there are no predefined classes. Instead, your role is determined by the weapon you wield. As a tank, it is essential to choose 2 weapons that best suit your playstyle and the situation at hand. While the ideal weapon can vary depending on the content you engage in and the composition of your group, it is advisable to initially focus on mastering 2 weapons before expanding your arsenal for increased versatility. Basically, your weapon is what makes you a tank. As soon as you equip a carnelian gem into your weapon, you then become a tank. Abilities will change and become taunt abilities because that gem is there, and you will also generate increased threat because you've got that carnelian gem equipped. When selecting your weapons, consider their ability to enhance your self-survivability, crowd control, debuff enemies, and buff your group. A popular starting choice is the sword and shield. This weapon offers both defensive capabilities and offensive benefits. It provides personal advantages and allows you to grant a 10% damage boost to your group. Additionally, the sword and shield offers access to area of effect taunting abilities, although it has become less favoured by tanks since the introduction of the greatsword. It remains the preferred weapon, particularly for new players. As you gain experience and become more comfortable with a less defensive playstyle, you can transition from the sword and shield to the greatsword. It is recommended to focus on either the sword and shield or the greatsword, as combining them diminishes group utility. However, for raid content with larger groups, there may be strategic advantages to utilising both weapons together, considering the multitude of buffs and debuffs provided by other group members. For the secondary weapon, beginners will find utility in the hatchet. It offers some group support and a crucial passive called Defy Death, which helps prevent your demise. Another option is the Warhammer, which excels in crowd control and AoE debuffing, making it essential for handling additional enemies. The Spear is an excellent choice for boss encounters, providing potent single target debuffs. However, its usefulness diminishes if somebody else in your group is already using it. The Great Axe is decent but not as effective as a Warhammer, although it can be suitable if your group is able to utilise both weapons together. So my recommended weapon setups include, for beginners, sword and shield plus hatchet. You can switch that hatchet to a Warhammer for ad pulls and then use the hatchet for boss fights if you want to kind of have that AoE debuffing, but then you want the survival and to give you that room for error, especially while you're learning. This setup combines the tankiness of the sword and shield with the utility of the hatchet, which offers an additional AoE taunt and the Defy Death passive. This configuration allows some more room for error, enabling you to learn and make some mistakes without severely impacting your group. However, it sacrifices crowd control and debuffs for ad pulls, making the Warhammer a valuable option for such situations. If you can, the best option is to switch it to the Warhammer during ad pulls so that you can get the benefits of that crowd control and then the survival with the hatchet on bosses. For intermediate players, the sword and shield once again, combined with the Warhammer for ad pulls and then a spear for bosses. Once you become more comfortable with tanking, you can replace the hatchet with a spear for boss fights. The spear's larger debuffs increases your group's damage output while still retaining the defensive benefits of the sword and shield. And obviously the Warhammer is exceptional for ad pulls. And then for experts, the greatsword with the Warhammer for ad pulls and the spear for bosses. At an advanced level, you may find that the sword and shield's usefulness diminishes. While it's beneficial to keep it for practicing new content, transitioning to the greatsword will provide more damage output. However, the greatsword requires more skill to utilise effectively, so it's advisable to stick with the sword and shield until you become more proficient. Remember, weapon choice is subjective and can vary based on personal preference, and the specific dynamics of your group. Continuously refine and adapt your weapon selection as you progress and become more experienced in tanking in New World. If you'd like more information on each weapon from the tank perspective, including the perks, the skills, the passives, and where you can farm these weapons, please see the website over at thetankclub.com for detailed weapon guides. When it comes to gear, it is recommended to use heavy armor to achieve a heavy equip load, ensuring greater resilience as a tank. However, for experienced players with well-organized groups, using light or medium armor becomes an option for advanced tanking, allowing for score pushing and increased DPS. The primary gear perk to focus on is ward gear. However, it's important to note that ward and bane gear will be removed from the game in October 2023. As a result, it is wise not to heavily invest in crafting or buying this gear at this stage. Instead, you can make use of easy to obtain farmable gear to sustain your tanking until the changes take effect. There are multiple types of ward gear available, such as Ancient Ward, Angry Earth, Beast Ward, Corrupted Ward, Human Ward, and Lost Ward. Each expedition in the game features a specific enemy type, and you should match your ward gear to the corresponding expedition for optimal effectiveness. It is crucial to distinguish between best in slot gear and easily obtainable gear. Best in slot gear typically includes perks that enhance your weapon abilities, such as things like Contagious Reverse Stab, Leeching Cyclone, Relentless Freedom. These perks, combined with both the ward perk and Refreshing, create a best in slot item. However, finding these items randomly through crafting or looting can be exceedingly challenging. You can find guides on easy to farm named gear on thetankclub.com, which provide valuable information on obtaining gear that can be used throughout your progression, even up to Mutation 10 expeditions. Gathering these easy farmable gear pieces will enable you to work towards acquiring best in slot gear over time. In terms of useful gear perks, prioritize refreshing and alternative refreshing options, along with elemental aversion, physical aversion, invigorated, freedom, vigor, and it's always good to have one piece of gear with the sturdy energy perk. For shields and amulets, protection perks can be utilized and are particularly beneficial. It is advised to obtain multiple amulets, each with a different protection perk, and then switch them depending on the type of boss that you are facing. Things like slash protection, strike protection, flame protection, and void protection are among the most useful options to have on your amulet. To tank most effectively, a tower shield must have the fortifying shield rush perk. This increases your defense by a huge amount by giving you a really strong amount of fortify when doing shield rush. Amulets should have health, a protection perk, and fortified is the best option when using that fortifying shield rush. Earrings should have the refreshing toast perk to reduce the cooldown of all potions. Rings with the hearty perk are recommended to provide additional max stamina, enabling more blocking and dodging. For more detailed information about New World tank gear, you can refer to the tank build section on thetankclub.com, which offers comprehensive insight and resources to help you optimize your tanking build. Heartrunes can provide significant additional benefits, and for tanks, the best one to start with is the Stalwart Heartrune of Stoneform. This rune is excellent for new players or challenging boss fights, as it reduces the damage you take and provides an emergency heal, effectively bringing you from near death back to full health. Furthermore, the brutal Heartrune of Grasping Vines is more group orientated. It applies Weaken and Rend as an area of effect to enemies, reducing the damage they deal and increasing the damage they receive. Combining this with other sources of Rend and Weaken ensures large uptimes, allowing your group to deal more damage. While other Heartrunes may become useful later on, these two are clearly beneficial for tanks in most situations. When tanking in New World, there is a range of consumables that you can and should use to enhance your performance and survivability. Firstly, let's revisit food, which we covered earlier under the attribute section. This is a crucial consumable that you should always have active as a tank. It helps you reach the necessary attribute milestones, and so it's very, very important. Next, you've got potions. They are an invaluable tool for various reasons. You can use multiple potions simultaneously, but they have to be different types. For instance, you can use For starters, a health potion for immediate restoration. You can also use a health restoration potion for gradual healing over time, and you can also use a ward potion to reduce incoming damage from specific enemy types, such as ancients. All of these potions are vital for your survival as a tank, and you should always ensure you have them available when needed. Keep ward potions active during combat when fighting specific enemy types. Regen potions can be helpful for sustaining health during battles as well, while health potions are best saved for quick burst healing when it's required. Another consumable is weapon coatings. Weapon coatings are another valuable consumable, serving as like the opposite of a ward potion. They need to match the enemy type you are facing. Applying an ancient coating to your weapon, for example, would increase the damage you deal to ancient enemies. Since New World expects tanks to output additional DPS, these coatings are essential for maintaining threat on enemy targets and doing more damage. Honing stones offer a cheap and easy DPS boost. They have a long duration, making it convenient to apply them to your weapon at the start of an expedition. These stones significantly increase your DPS and in turn help you generate more threat against enemies. Trophies are crucial for increasing your DPS as well. Each house can hold up to 5 trophies, with the option of owning up to 3 houses. You can have 1 trophy of each type per house. Using the same type of trophy once in all 3 houses is possible, and there are major, basic, and minor trophies. 3 minor trophies are the easiest to obtain and offer a 9% total increase to damage to a specific enemy type, while basic trophies grant a 12% boost and major trophies provide a 15% increase. So these are really important. As mentioned already, you can have things like ancient trophies, which will improve your damage against ancient enemies or corrupted enemies or whatever enemy type you're going to face. So when you go into an expedition, you need to have the trophies available for that expedition. Lastly, we've got oak flesh balm, gemstone dust, and incense. It can be utilized to reduce incoming damage of specific types. Oak flesh balm mitigates physical damage, gemstone dust handles elemental damage, and incense reduces damage from all types. It's helpful to have these consumables available to cover damage types that are not at the 50% absorption cap, but are likely to be encountered in the content you are facing. In New World, there are various methods to reduce incoming damage and increase your survivability. One effective approach is to utilize Fortify skills and perks, which provide armor buffs. However, Fortify is actually capped at 50%. A great way to set up is by using a sword and shield along with the shield rush ability, with a shield that has the fortifying shield rush perk, along with an amulet with the fortify perk. When you use shield rush, you gain a 33% armor boost for 8 seconds. The base cooldown on shield rush is 20 seconds, but this can be reduced by equipping gear with the refreshing perk or by using light attacks or reverse stab, allowing you to maintain nearly 100% uptime on the extra 33% armor. When you combine this with gems and other absorption or armor buffs, you'll easily be at the 50% fortify cap, meaning you'll be taking a lot less damage from enemies. Gems also play a role in reducing incoming damage. Using a full set of opal gems combined with fortify can help you reach the resistance cap of 50% for all magic damage types. However, you can adjust your gem choices to suit your specific needs. It's important to note that when stacking damage absorption for certain expedition mutations and raids, each individual resistance is effectively capped at 50%. If you already have 50% resistances to a specific damage type, gaining additional fortify effects won't provide further benefits for absorbing that particular damage. However, it will still enhance resistances to other damage types that are below the 50% cap. The term soft capped is used because you can exceed the 50% resistance cap by combining resistances from perks and gems. For instance, using a flame protection amulet, a flame shield ward on your shield, and ruby gems in all 8 gear pieces would result in around 68% flame resistance. However, the additional resistance only applies when stacking through those specific sources. Adding fortify to this setup wouldn't provide any further benefits. Certain bosses in the game deal significant damage of specific types. It's wise to equip an amulet with a protection perk matching the damage type inflicted by those bosses. For example, when facing bosses in Imperium Forge, having flame resistance at 50% or more would be highly beneficial. Similarly, for bosses in Barnacles, stacking slash protection would provide the most advantage. A comprehensive list of all raid and expedition bosses and the recommended protection perk can be found over on our website. Potions and consumables can also contribute to damage reduction. If your resistances are below the 50% cap, you can use incense, oak flesh bomb and gemstone dust to further reduce the enemy's damage. In New World, the ward perks and potions play a crucial role in reducing damage from specific enemy types. However, it's important to note that these mechanics will be removed from the game in October 2023. Until then, they remain essential for optimizing your tanking performance. Each PvE content area features specific enemy types, and you can use wards to decrease the damage inflicted by those enemies. For example, during a Mutation 10 Ancient expedition such as Lazarus, enemies split their damage 50-50, with 50% of their damage being Ancient damage. So using Ancient ward perks and potions in this scenario provides a significant damage reduction. For lower mutations, this value may be slightly less, but wards still provide high value for mitigating damage. While these mechanics will eventually be removed, for now it's vital for tanks to take full advantage of wards to maximise their survivability and effectiveness in various PvE encounters. It's important to combine the appropriate ward with other damage reduction sources. For instance, a corrupted expedition may involve bosses that deal strike damage, so you would need both strike reduction and corrupted ward sources to complete that expedition. If you enter a mutated expedition, you will have to contend with the additional effects, for example a nature mutation. In this scenario, you'd require the corrupted ward gear perks and potions, strike protection on your amulet, and amber gems for the nature ward for full coverage to maximise your damage reduction and ease your tanking experience. In New World, the threat and taunt systems play a vital role. Aggro is obtained by the person with the highest threat level. Using a taunt skill instantly propels you to the top of the threat list. However, it's important to generate sufficient threat before you use a taunt, as once the taunt expires, if your base threat is not high enough, enemies may disengage from you. If you're facing challenges with threat generation, the first step is to ensure that your group members are working together rather than against each other. Healers should avoid pre-healing or using AoE healing before group members are in position and have received damage. It becomes impossible to maintain aggro when group members are scattered, causing enemies to also spread out. In such cases, your DPS and taunt skills may not be enough to round up enemies from different corners of a room. When enemies are stacked together, you can utilize AoE crowd control, damage, and taunt skills to maintain control. Additionally, your group members can assist by using complementary skills such as the Great Axe when you're using a Warhammer, which can provide additional AoE crowd control or stacking abilities. If you still struggle with threat generation, consider equipping an earring with the Despised perk, as it provides a significant 146% increase to threat generation. Furthermore, make sure to use pristine carnelian gems in your weapons, preferably without a casting, as this reduces the threat percentage, helping you maintain control over enemies more effectively. The key to managing threat and aggro effectively is centered around group positioning and skillful ability rotation. As a tank, you must learn to lead the group into optimal positions and carefully time the usage of taunt skills. Avoid using them too closely together. Balancing light and heavy attacks within your rotation also plays a crucial role in maintaining damage and control over enemies' aggression. By honing these skills, you can insert your dominance as a tank and keep the enemies firmly focused on you during encounters. So we've just covered a lot of information and the theory behind tanking. Now we're going to go into how to actually tank. And we're going to look at sort of ad pulls in between boss fights. And maintaining aggro of enemies is the most essential and challenging aspect of tanking in New World. It's important to note that losing aggro is not always the tank's fault, but can result from the group's positioning and lack of cooperation. As a tank in New World, you must take the lead and manage your group effectively. Failure to position correctly or follow instructions can lead to chaotic situations and rapid loss of aggro. The basics of tanking involve always being ahead of the group, leading them into combat. Ad pulls can be particularly difficult due to the game's design, room layouts, and the spread of enemies, especially ranged foes. Typically, as a tank, you'll run into a pack of ads, hitting each one with a light attack as you pass by. Then you'll focus on a specific ranged enemy, gathering all the other enemies around it. Ranged enemies are challenging to move effectively, so it's just much faster to actually stack on the ranged enemies themselves. Even though skills like Reap exist that pull enemies to you, they have a very small and limited range, and they don't really work very well when you have multiple ranged enemies spread across a large room. Once the enemies are stacked, use skills for taunting and crowd control as your group engage in combat. At this point you should have the highest threat level and an active taunt. It's crucial that healers avoid placing AoE healing on the ground before you reach your final stacking position, as it will be wasted and can draw aggro away from you. Healers who prematurely cast AoE healing can create difficulties for tanks. During ad pulls, taunt abilities have limited durations, making it necessary to control enemies, deal significant AoE damage, and maintain threat. The Warhammer is exceptional for these scenarios. Skills like Shockwave are ideal as they stagger and stun the enemy while taunting and applying debuffs, whereas Clear Out can be problematic as it pushes enemies away. Wrecking Ball is useful for smashing enemies into the ground, preventing them from escaping or dealing damage, especially to your allies. With the Sword and Shield, Shield Rush staggers enemies and Defender's Resolve provides an 8-second taunt, although it has a 45-second cooldown. Following up with reverse stab and light attacks along with the refreshing move perk on your sword can further reduce cooldowns. In some cases it may not be feasible to stack enemies using the method described above, especially when dealing with numerous ranged enemies. In these situations you can direct your entire group to stack in a location where enemies cannot see you, such as behind a wall or obstacle. This forces the enemies to gather in a stack within your line of sight, allowing you to hit them with AoE abilities for aggro and crowd control while your group eliminate them. Mini boss fights frequently occur during ad pulls, posing challenges, particularly when dealing with ranged enemies. It's important to communicate with your group where you want them to stack, and sometimes putting the mini boss on the ranged enemies to ensure proper positioning is needed. It's sometimes also an option for group members to purposefully gain aggro on ranged enemies and then run away from them slightly so that they move on top of the boss. This then allows for the tank to maintain a static position but aggro enemies as they get pulled within the range of taunt. In these situations it's ideal for the tank not to burn through all taunt cooldowns too early in the fight. When dealing with ad pulls you realistically want to use the Warhammer as if it's your main hand weapon, because the abilities, passives and threat generation you'll get are better than with other weapons. Boss fights require a different approach compared to ad pulls. Like in most MMORPGs, it's advisable to turn enemies away from your group once you have established aggro. This helps reduce the cleave damage and allows your group members to take advantage of backstab or flanking damage bonuses. In New World you cannot play as a traditional defensive tank by rotating cooldowns or solely relying on blocking attacks. Instead you need to adopt an evasive tanking style, utilising dodge to avoid damage rather than heavily relying on blocking. This aspect can be challenging for new players as bosses unleash powerful attacks that require careful dodging. To maintain aggro, you must deal substantial damage between taunts to stay ahead of the healers and the damage dealers on the threat meter. Understanding boss mechanics and animations is crucial for successful dodging. Gaining this expertise comes from repeatedly engaging in boss fights and learning to recognise sound and animation cues, enabling you to anticipate and dodge specific attacks with precision. This level of experience is crucial for becoming a successful tank in New World. If you're new to tanking or entering new content, you can always begin by rotating your block, using short bursts of block between ability casts and light attacks to prevent being overwhelmed by big hits. You should always follow up a blocked attack with a heavy attack to regenerate lost stamina. Throughout boss fights, always try to remember the heavy after a heavy principle, which means following a blocked heavy attack or mechanic with your own heavy attack, as bosses typically do not chain attacks in rapid succession providing a window for stamina regeneration. Utilising Shield Rush combined with the Fortifying Shield Rush perk on a tower shield to boost resistances and reduce damage taken is really essential for things like boss fights. Using a sword and shield makes the learning experience much easier. It's also important to maintain debuffs on enemies such as Weaken to reduce their damage output and Rend to increase the damage they receive. Spreading out skill casts during boss fights is advisable, avoiding the excessive use of taunt skills in quick succession. Instead, instigate combat with basic attacks to gain threat on a target and then use a taunt skill to secure aggro. Rotate sword skills with light attacks to benefit from refreshing move perks on your sword, and this would also reduce your cooldowns. For example, when instigating a boss fight, you can start with Shield Rush for buffing you and weakening the enemy, followed by a light attack, using Defender's Resolve to secure that aggro and give you some self buffs, do another light attack, and then use Reverse Stab, which will reduce your cooldowns. Do another light attack and then switch to your secondary weapon. If you're using a Warhammer, heavy attacks are beneficial, taking advantage of an active taunt and weaken. Start with Armor Breaker followed by a heavy attack, Wrecking Ball, another heavy attack, and then use Shockwave to taunt and weaken the enemies. As you gain experience, you'll rely more on dodging big attacks rather than blocking, which is more sustainable since certain attacks can deplete 80% of your stamina in a single hit. Dodging allows for 3 consecutive dodges before running out of stamina, and not blocking enables more stamina generation. When you're blocking, stamina regeneration is turned off. If you run out of stamina, you become block broken, rendering you unable to block or dodge until your stamina reaches 100%. This makes tanking particularly challenging for new players because getting block broken seems to be a pretty frequent thing for new players, and so it's something you really want to avoid. So you need to be regularly dropping block, regularly doing heavy attacks, and actively trying to regenerate stamina as much as possible. Dodging is superior to blocking in New World due to the game's collision issues. When you hold block, you often experience being pushed around and sliding along the floor, as bosses with large hitboxes exert pressure. Additionally, bosses tend to spin around and clip through your character, posing a threat to melee damage dealers in your group, as they will quite often do cleave damage and hit those people. Dodging, on the other hand, allows you to maintain your position more effectively. The dodge animation prevents the boss's attack animation from making contact with your character, thereby keeping you in place. Each boss fight in New World will have different challenges, and you really have to pay attention to those combat cues, the sounds, the visuals, the animations, and the only way to improve in these scenarios is to get as much experience as you can at the standard level of Expedition, and then as you progress onto the mutated versions, you'll be well prepared for every boss fight once you know what attacks to dodge, which ones you can take unblocked, and which things you might need to block. This concludes our guide. If you have any questions or need further information about New World tanking, feel free to join our Discord community. The link is in the description below. We have a very supportive community of experienced New World tanks ready to assist you with any queries that you may have. For a comprehensive written guide and more tank information, please visit thetankclub.com. A special thanks to all of our Patreon subscribers and YouTube members for their support in fostering the growth of the Tank Club. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye for now.